I'd like to welcome you all to day 2 of the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services Small Business National Training Conference. Thank you for coming back for day 2. We have another exciting agenda. Very good. Please turn off your cell phones, if you would, or silence them. Coming to the stage for our formal opening remarks is Ms. Katrina Brisbane.
Good morning. It's so great to see all of you back this morning. Thank you so much for taking time out of your schedules again to be here and hear from our government officials, all the wonderful things that are going on to ensure that we are continually creating opportunities for small business. So just won't be before you long. Just want to say a couple things, just kind of recap a little bit on yesterday. So some of the things that we heard about yesterday, rehash of the Rule of Two, the OFPP, the Office of Federal Procurement Policy memo that will actually go out to remind contracting officials. That's been around. Sam let us know yesterday. It's been around for 40 years. And so sometimes we just have to remind our workforces that, hey, this is how we execute on this regulation. So you heard about that. You heard about some of the litigation developments that have been ongoing, and what are some of the culminations of some of those. We heard about the NDAA FY24, some of the tenets there. We know about the increase up to 5%. Okay, all right, increase of 5% of the goal for OSDBU. So I think we all probably already knew about that. Late payment notifications to subs that primes have to make now. It used to be actually 90 days. It's down to 30 days if they're more than 30 days late on their payments to subs. We heard a little bit about self-certifications for OSDBUs now. And then additionally, some 8A program updates that came out of that NDAA. So those things are really great in that notifications with regards to 8A programs where it was previously in the program, but now considered a new requirement. I see that quite often. And so if it's now considered a new requirement, there has to be some notification when it's not continually subject to the 8A program. Additionally, when an agency intends to procure an 8A as a contract requirement as a follow-on in 8A, but they're going to utilize a limited competition type of vehicle, vice an open 8A competition. So those things are very, very relevant for this group to make sure that we're tracking on those and ensuring that we are, giving attention to where, especially in the 8A area, if you are an 8A firm. Additionally, we heard a little bit about the positioning of HHS divisions and how the contracting officials actually engage with small businesses. So please take note on those things. They're very important so that you can continually reach out to small business specialists, small business professionals to get additional information. And sometimes they can be a pathway to assist you with actually asking questions of contracting officers and sometimes program officials. So those are some really, really great follow-ups to what we talked about yesterday. And so that you can kind of keep those things in mind. I'm hopeful that everybody took copious notes on the information that was provided on yesterday. Now we will go into our next day of discussions. And so on the agenda first this morning is the HCA town hall, where you'll hear from our heads of contracting on some of their engagement and how they expect to engage with small businesses within their respective agencies. So I won't continue or further delay. I will pass it on over back to the OSDBU, who are going to introduce that panel. But looking forward to all of the discussions today. I really believe that these are also going to be great tools in your toolbox to be able to further engage with HHS and understand our contract opportunities. Thank you.
And now we will welcome to the stage Mr. Shane Cram, who's going to moderate our next panel with our heads of contracting authorities, Ms. Nancy Norton, Mr. Leonard Grant, Mr. Makoto, Braxton, and Mr. Kenyatta Wesley.
Good morning. See everybody today. As the panel is getting seated, I'd like to thank Shannon Jackson and the entire OSDBU team for this fantastic two-day conference. What a wonderful job. And I would like to thank, of course, the small business community for, again, taking your time to come out here and join us today as we go over different topics. My name is Shane Cram. I'm the Deputy Senior Procurement Executive with HHS. And it's my pleasure to be here this morning and to be with my distinguished colleagues to my right, heads of contracting activities for 4 of our operating divisions, representing the Administration for Children and Families, the Administration for Strategic Preparedness and Response, Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, and the Food and Drug Administration. Over about the next 40 minutes, we're going to kind of explore from each of their perspectives and their operating divisions, how they engage with small business. So you can kind of get a feel of how they're doing that engagement and how it applies to their respective missions. And with that, at the end of that time, we hope to be able to have a few minutes set aside to take questions from you, the audience, for any of them to ask. So I'd like to take this time, starting at the end of the table, the far end, with Makoto, and ask each of the HCAs to introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about your operating division.
All right, thank you, Shane. Good morning, all, and thank you very much for attending this very important event to improve our communication and collaboration between the United States government and our industry partners. My name is Makoto Braxton. I'm the head of the contracting activity for the Administration for Strategic Preparedness and Response. Sorry, we actually just recently became an operating division, so sometimes Assistant Secretary for Preparedness Response is still in my brain, but we are no longer in the Office of the Secretary. So ASPR, again, is an operating division now within HHS, and our mission is to prepare for, respond to, and recover from public health emergencies and disasters. So major program offices within ASPR include the Biomedical Advanced Research and Development Authority, or BARDA for short, the Strategic National Stockpile, or SNS for short, and Industrial Base Management and Supply Chain, or IBMSC for short. So at ASPR, we execute a very large volume of advanced research and development contracts and agreements for medical countermeasures to known and emerging threat conditions. So that's what BARDA does. SNS actually procures the medical countermeasures that BARDA develops and puts it into the Strategic National Stockpile, obviously for preparedness in the event of any natural or man-made event. And our IBMSC office actually issues contracts for capacity preservation or capacity expansion for all manners of active pharmaceutical ingredients, essential medicines, medical products, and supplies. And finally, I'll note that, we do deploy medical assistance teams to the field to operate in austere environments, such as after a hurricane or a wildfire. So we also issue contracts to support that body of work. And I'll pass it off to Leonard.
Thank you, Makoto. Want me to come up? Good morning, everyone. I think you all have heard of the FDA, correct? But just in case you haven't, or you haven't, been on the news, or the FDA, I support the FDA. So again, my name is Leonard Grant. I'm the head of contracting activity for the FDA. I'm also the director of the Office of Acquisition and Grant Services. And so within my office, we do both contracts, grants, we do interagency agreements, and also have oversight of the purchase card. We support the FDA mission. So that's the safety, efficacy, and delivery of human and veterinarian drugs, medical products. We're responsible for a lot of the blood biological products, as well as looking just in terms of just a regulatory arm of the HHS. Tobacco, we are regulatory in tobacco, looking to be able to help the cessation of tobacco within the United States and abroad. Our office, the primary contracts that we're doing really are in IT. We have various professional services as well as administrative services. We also are looking for help in the R&D space. So we do have R&D contracts that we also let. One of the things that we also do, and I talked about the tobacco program, is we also have state contracts. So we also have contracts with state and local governments that are actually some of their health officials are commissioned to be inspectors on behalf of the FDA, and so we have a huge program that is state run, or we work with the states. However, in some of those where there isn't necessarily states that can do it, we do work with small businesses to be able to help do that. So I'll turn it over now to Kenyatta.
Good morning, everyone. So first off, good morning to my esteemed colleagues and all of you. I am the head of contracting activity for the Administration of Children and Families. I often describe our part of the HHS portfolio as the largest organization that very little people know about. A lot of things that are in our portfolio, a lot of people are assumed elsewhere. So for example, Head Start. Most people think it's under Department of Education. Some people see free lunches for children, and they think it is under FDA or it's under Department of Education, but it's not. It's Administration of Children and Families. People start thinking about Office of Refugee and Resettlement. They think it's Homeland Security or Department of Defense, but it's not. It's Administration of Children and Families. And ORR is made up of two different sections. It's about families that come in through the process, and then it's also about unaccompanied minors and children that are found at the border or discovered at the border. And so often, a lot of people are trying to figure out, where do I go to support an agency that is all about kids and families? I often tell people my organization is the organization of feelings. It attracts very passionate human beings to work there, and they care immensely about how things work and getting things for the American people. Sometimes I said, we're sometimes acquisition challenged, and this is where you all come into play. All right, and we'll talk a little bit through the questions and answers about how you engage with us and how you can become more effective communicators with us. But I'll tell you, I use the phrase all the time because we're one of the two youngest organizations in contracting for HHS, is that we are open for business. And we'll talk about that.
So good morning. I'm Nancy Norton. I'm the director of the Office of Acquisition Services at the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. Welcome to CDC. So at CDC, our part of the broader HHS mission that Katrina Brisbane did such a beautiful job of kind of summarizing yesterday is the prevention and the response to public health threats. That's, in a nutshell, what CDC does. Some of the big programs that we manage that you're probably aware of are the Vaccines for Children program that vaccinates about 50% of the children in the United States, very important program. The World Trade Center Health Program provides health care to 9/11 first responders and people that were impacted by 9/11, also a very impactful health program. Those are a couple of the big programs, but then there's a whole lot of less sexy, less visible programs that are going on in the area of infectious diseases, zoonotic diseases, smoking, injury, all of those threats to public health that are managed by CDC. Our spend in acquisition and contracts is about 20.5 billion, and contracts are about 8 billion of that total spend. And our contracts, our largest spend is in vaccines, which is understandable. And then our next two categories are the broad areas of professional services and IT. I liked when I look at my colleagues here and we talk about public health, if you look at HHS, I feel like we're kind of this invisible shield. Each of us has a role, and together we kind of create this shield of public health that supports the country. So thank you for coming, and hopefully we'll have some good information for you today.
Thank you. Thank you for the introductions. What a great panel and wealth of experience here this morning. So let's start this off with a bit of a success story. How about that? A small business success story. And Leonard, I'd like to ask you if you can recount a notable small business success story that you can recall from your career, and let us know, or let the audience know, what strategies do you feel contributed to that small business's success?
Now, I think that's sort of a trick question, right? Because whatever businesses know, I think just the community of small business in my tenure as an acquisition professional, when I thought about this question, I could go back to sort of my early on 1102 and working with Zimmerman, which was a document management. That was my first award to a 8A company for document and records management. And so I just remember the feeling of being able to have that partnership. It was an 8A, so of course supporting the 8As, small businesses, that was a huge success, and they brought in, that partnership to be able to help us solve problems, and I think that was probably, the greatest reward is then the return on investment in terms of what we were doing at the time. Now, as you span a little bit, later in my career, there's just been a number of different small business and successes. Multimedia is another one that comes to my mind, and that's more direct because they're supporting my office directly, and so they've helped us in doing acquisition dashboards, as well as putting together some portals where we can my 1102s can actually see what vehicles are out there to support, small businesses or some of the other mandates that we have. And so I think it's just been over that span of time, being able to work with various partners to be able to solve the challenges. I think the CPR acronym is so apropos in that space and what they were able to do for us.
Great, thank you. So as the CDC, where we're sitting here today, many of you may not know, but in FY23, they were the second largest producer of contract actions within HHS, as well as the second largest obligation on contract actions, as Nancy alluded to in her intro, of a little over $8 billion. So I'd like to turn to Nancy and ask you, what approaches does your office employ to engage with small and socioeconomic small businesses throughout the acquisition process?
Thank you. So I'm going to talk about this kind of in three categories. So the first category is, what have we historically done? Well, historically, we've just kind of done the normal things you do per the FAR throughout the process. We engage with small businesses on the front end in our market research as we're looking for sources for requirements in our acquisition planning. And then we publicize actions. So we kind of did the normal low level things you have to do as part of the process. That's changing. So what we're doing today is very different. So many of you may have also attended our small business engagement event that we had in February. I think that's the first time in many years that CDC actually hosted their own event, and that's the first of many to come. We're also really increasing our market research efforts and how we use market research. I think, that tends to be a check the box kind of thing. A lot of times people put out their notice looking for small businesses. You get what you get and you just keep moving. We've got to do better than that, and we've started doing better than that. So we're going to be engaging more intensely through market research. We're doing more industry days on specific requirements to find small businesses, and also doing market research that we should be doing to engage small businesses and telling us, where can we do better? How can we improve this requirement? What can you do in this area that we're not seeing that we should be mindful of? And then finally, so those are things that are beginning to change, emerging things. Also in the now category, we have a small business market research tool that we've developed at CDC, where we catalog and manage capability statements to allow our staff to better find small businesses to meet their requirements. But then in the last category, the future, we are going to continue to expand how we're doing market research. We're going to continue to have small business engagement events that are conversational, not just us talking to you, but getting your feedback and having you talk to us. And just increasing. Now, we met our small business goals. You saw this yesterday for the first time ever last year, all of them. And we intend to keep that up. And so what the future holds is continuing to find new ways to engage small business in a two-way conversation.
Great, thank you, Nancy. And what I'd like to do is try to give you just a little bit of a compare and contrast with the ACF, who also does a significant amount of spend or obligation within HHS, but on much fewer transactions. So I'd like to ask Kenyatta on what approaches the ACF takes to engage with small and socioeconomic small businesses.
Yeah, so first off, I tell you, first thing we do is we created a teamwork environment, right? Let me explain to you what that means. Everything that gets done in acquisition takes a group of people. And so it starts with getting our small business team involved very early in the process. All right. So whether it's Christine, whether it's Shannon himself, it doesn't matter. We go to the right person and have them be a part of the Tiger team that we're putting together for each acquisition. We bring in the contracting team in the program shop, and we start talking about what actually is the root deliverable for each action. And then we start putting out actual market research that is not vague, but actually asking candid questions to lead you into what we're wanting, right? Because you can't help me if I don't help you help me, right? And so we're going after very targeted market research. Then we're also adding in market intelligence to our discussions, because market research and market intelligence are two different things. And when you're trying to figure out what the market can truly bear, what are the actual opportunities for industry to actually deliver something to us the way we are expecting it, or if industry has something better, you must engage. So we started not just putting out RFIs and synopsis, but we actually started bringing in for actual industry days again. We went a little bit old school, right? Because sometimes you need to actually bring people in a room and have the conversation. In order to actually expand and have real competition, right? Not just competition on the surface, but real competition. We've opened up a lot of those days virtually, right? So kind of like if you see virtual home tours and people can actually ask questions live streaming, right? And started incorporating technology into the way we do market research because we really needed the information. The government knows a lot, but it doesn't know everything. And we need you to help us. And so when we start driving after having two-way communication in our market research, we're asking you questions and giving you opportunities to ask us questions during that market research so we can actually provide more thorough performance work statements, quality assurance plans, performance requirement summaries, so you know what the standard of acceptability will be. And then last but not least, actually following up with you all after the solicitation is dropped and we've made our award. We actually follow up and ask questions about the process. How was it with you? Do you think we followed and kept our word throughout the process? All right. Believe it or not, that is a very deliberate intent, because you have to instill public trust, and you can't instill public trust if you're not talking to the public. Right. So I'll pause there for now, and then there is an ACF session, I think, at noon, and we'll go into a little bit more detail there.
Thank you. Thank you, Kenyatta, for that. I'd like to transition to Makoto to talk to us about how, when a small business seeks to pursue procurement opportunities with the ASPR, what is a recommendation or recommended practice for effectively engaging with contracting or program officials?
Thank you, Shane. So, one thing I'll say, and I'll dovetail off of what Kenyatta said about teamwork. When small businesses come talk to me, I always tell them that if you are only talking to me or somebody on my team, you're way too late in the game, right? Because by the time my team intakes a requirements package, the program's probably already done their market research, they've already done their acquisition planning, and I'm moving forward to solicitation. So if you're not engaging with the program folks, like I said, you're probably too late, because I'm putting a solicitation out and you might not have the time to react. So you need to be talking with both, not just one. So kind of one recommendation is, engage with the Office of External Affairs at ASPR, engage with the contracting team too, and ask us to put you in touch with with those program officials, so you can start talking to them kind of on the front end as opposed to the back end, because contracting is the back end of the process, right? There's already a requirements package, there's already an acquisition plan. I'm already moving to solicitation at that point. I would also, kind of something that Shannon said yesterday, do your homework. Look at the appropriations bills for the ASPR or any agency that you're looking to support. What programs are being funded? What programs are not? What programs are emerging and getting more funding? Which programs are getting put on the back burner by Congress because maybe there were previous administration priorities or whatever the circumstance may be? Because ultimately, one thing you got to remember about contracting is we're a tool and a risk mitigation measure for a program manager. A program manager has a mission, and they have the funding to carry out that mission. So you have to design a bespoke solution for them. They're not going to just sit and talk to you about a general capability statement and then think about, well, okay, so this company is good at doing this. Now I'm going to design a requirement for the strengths of that company. That's not the way that it works. It works the other way around. So y'all have to make sure that you're, again, doing your homework and designing a bespoke solution for the program manager to mitigate risk and meet their mission. And that's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Makoto. Great recommendation. From the FDA perspective, Leonard, do you have any recommendations for the audience?
Most of what Makoto said is sort of the same at the FDA. However, one of the things that we were able to do or in our forecast is actually put the program people or the points of contact that are in the programs there. So when you look at our forecast, you're not getting the CSs, you're getting the program people. And so I think for the challenge for us is ensuring that when you reach out to those program people, they call you back or they at least respond. And I know that's a challenge and a difficulty within FDA. And we're working to try to be able to, create a better communication for that. But that's one of the things that we've put in place, because we know that that's the focal point. And like Makoto says, when the requirements package comes over to our contract specialists, they're looking at the market research report and validating it. And maybe there's changes, but a lot of times, there've already been sort of kind of this decided of what's going to happen. And so my 1102s then are looking to how can we push, especially if it's, a large business or something that's full and open, how can we push it back into the small business arena and have those conversations? So to me, it's just, trying to that resiliency and trying to talk with the program people and making sure that you are prepared and ready when that door does open and say, hey, we have, tools, or we have these processes that can support what you're doing.
Thank you,
Hey,
Leonard.
Hey, Shane, can I just add one?
Yeah, absolutely. Go ahead. Ken.
So when all of us have specific events now when it comes to small business engagement and industry engagement, which are two separate things. One's focused on small business in particular, and then one is focused on all of industry academia. One of the things that we did in ACF is, for the first time in its history, is actually put together an advanced planning brief to industry, where we laid out all the requirements for that current year and what was upcoming for the next year. And we're doing that again in May, which is 6th through 10th of May. All right. And it's both in person in DC, and it's also laid out virtually as well for those who may not be able to travel, or if we're full. So I just want to give that as an example, because we're actually trying to inform you to make sure you have enough time to figure out where to put your bid and proposal dollars, because we're trying to have real, you keep hearing me use the word real competitions. All right. I'm bringing my sole sourcing down. So is the rest of the team. And we're increasing competition, and it's not competition in name, it's competition in action. All right. And I think just want to make sure I emphasize that for you all, because when you see those RFIs hit the street, you start coming in to see contracting professionals, you coming into program offices, as Makoto said, be prepared. And all these engagements that we're doing are targeted to give you an opportunity to be prepared.
Thank you. Thank you for that. So, so moving on, I'd like to bring up one of probably the largest or biggest, most frequent questions or complaints that we receive from the small business community over time. And that is, with the abundance of sources sought notices or requests for information that the government puts out, or in this case, HHS puts out, the ability for small businesses to take the time and the expense to respond to them can be challenging. And in many cases, the small business community doesn't respond. So I'd like to ask Kenyatta to kind of give his perspective on why it is crucial that when those sources sought or RFIs go out, that small businesses respond, so that the development of the acquisition strategy can be inclusive of small businesses. Kenyatta?
Yeah, I'm a huge advocate of synopsises going out and then coming back and following up with RFIs. And let me tell you why that is. And then I'm going to say why you need to always respond. Okay? If you are interested, you need to respond. So why am I a huge advocate of doing the synopsis first? The first reason is I need to know what is available in that space. It's a generic way for me to just know how many companies do what I need. Okay? That's my starting place. That is not the ending place. But if you don't respond to that, to let me know you're out there, the RFI process may not take place. Okay? Then we go back to the RFI, because I need to go and ask you some very specific questions. I need to give you an actual draft PWS or a summary of what my requirement is going to be, and ask you very specific questions to help hone and shape that requirement. Industry doesn't get to tell the government what its requirement is. You just don't, because we're the customer to you. So we know what we need to buy, but we may not know what's all out there and what are the potential and options. And so you get a chance to shape that requirement, even though you don't get to tell us what the requirement is. And if you don't respond and give me what my options are, you're assuming that the government knows every option that's available to it. You miss an opportunity to shape the requirement. If you don't respond, you are then what we in the government call a non-interested party. Anybody in the room know what a non-interested party is? All right, you have just forfeited your right to do a lot of complaining. And I'm sorry, but I know my contractors. I love y'all, but y'all like to complain. So why are you forfeiting your right to complain in the first place? Respond. It's important to respond, because if you respond, I now know you exist. My program office knows you exist. When you respond, answer every single question that we ask of you. If we ask you 5 questions and one's a 2-part question, don't not answer that 2-part question because you will be deemed a non-interested party. As a small business, that rule of 2 that was talked about yesterday is so critical to us being able to establish your technical competence, not technical acceptability. Technical acceptability is in the source selection. Technical competence is in the market research and us trying to determine whether or not your company have the skills, the capabilities, and experience to even compete for the work we are trying to do. So I'm telling you and informing you that if you don't take a minute to respond and that work goes full and open, please don't come up to my colleagues and I and say, why is that going full and open? You know there are small businesses that can do it. I know it can rain every other day too, but that doesn't mean it's gonna happen, right? I use a little brevity and humor with this because I want it to stick, but your responses have power, all right? And they have influence, so please use it.
Excellent advice. Thank you for that. So with our time left, I'd like to go ahead and turn to the audience to take advantage of this wealth of knowledge and experience before you. For any questions that you may have, real time, right now. Yes, ma'am.
Here, I push this. So this question is for Kenyatta. I guess it's a good time question in light of what you just shared with us. Janae, that's okay. Janae McCorkle, IBEX. So you mentioned about the dilemma that you all face with us not responding.
Yes.
The challenge that many of us are seeing, however, is when you put out something that we cannot respond to. Because to your point, you want to make sure that we're responding in kind to the questions that you phrase.
Mm-hmm.
So many small businesses may not necessarily have or be able to frame a response based upon how you write the requirements. So can you speak to that in terms of some of the things that you all have been looking to see? Because I keep hearing we don't respond.
Yeah.
We want to respond, but oftentimes we just can't.
So that was kind of open-ended. So I'm gonna try to answer it based on what I think I heard. And if I miss anything, please don't hesitate to tell me. So the first thing we are trying to do is make sure that when we are asking a question, it is a question, right? And not a statement. All right. Because I realized when I first came to my organization that people were saying, well, we need small business. We need a fair and reasonable price, but they weren't asking, well, how do you generically price similar situations and items and give you a chance to respond to that? We weren't asking what I call the right questions. So now we actually have instituted a process that actually looks at market research questions before they go out. So that way we know that we've asked questions. Are those questions relevant? You heard some speakers yesterday talk about the relevancy of what we're doing. Well, if I don't ask you questions that are relevant to what I'm asking or needing from you, then that's not real market research. It's jaded or slanted market research, and that doesn't give me a positive outcome, right? So my team is going through constant training and development on RFIs, true Q&A, having interactive conversations with industry. So industry can say, well, I thought I heard you say this, but your document reads this way. Because if we get that feedback, we can make that correction to make sure that we all are interpreting the document the same way. Because I can't get a real competition from any of you if you're reading the one document 12 different ways, right? So that's one of the ways. Hopefully I answered your question.
And I just want to add one thing at CDC that we're talking about. So, when people come back to me and say, well, I put out an RFI or a sources sought and nobody responded, depending on what that requirement is, we're starting to go back out and ask some very simple questions like, what's the obstacle? What's preventing industry from being able to respond to this? Because we don't know what we don't know. Very often the requirements that come over from program there's something in there that we don't recognize necessarily as an obstacle for industry. So I think I agree with everything. What Kenyatta is doing is awesome, but I think we're also just asking some basic questions. Why didn't we get anything? And hopefully people will respond to those as well, because at the end of the day, Kenyatta hit the nail on the head. We only know what you tell us.
Thank you, Nancy. Okay, another question. Yes, sir.
I have a question, Greg Palmer of Greg Palmer Inc. Yesterday, you kind of mentioned it about these RFIs. My question is, when we responded to some of these RFIs, we never hear back. So can you kind of explain, the process of responding back to us when we respond to you guys? Because like I said, we've done RFIs where we never hear anything. It's like it just vanishes. Thanks.
Is that working?
Okay, so I do talk about that often when I go out to speak to various industry groups. And so one of the things that's important to know, just with like small businesses and HCAs, if you want to add to this, feel free to do it. But the contracting organizations are, so one contracting officer, contract specialist have multiple requirements in their workload. And what they tend to do is they will work with their program offices to take a look at those responses and then be able to have those responses inform that requirement. That is what we tend to do with it. With regards to our staffing, we just do not have the bandwidth to respond to every RFI that we receive. It just can't happen. Most of the time, the acquisition workforce is very, very short-staffed. We have a lot of staffing gaps. And so our ability to respond to every RFI we receive is just very limited, and if not impossible. So what I would ask you to do is, if you're interested in that requirement, then continue to track it and follow it. And then you may be able to see where your specific response may have informed that requirement, because that's what we're looking for. We're trying to understand what industry is doing in specific area. What are processes that we may not know about? What are technologies that we may not know about in order for us to more efficiently meet a specific mission requirement? And so I would say track it and take a look at it, but we just do not have holistically the staffing to respond to every RFI that we receive. I personally have one. My deputy Shane has said, hey, you want me to take that off your hand? It's been sitting in my inbox for about November to now. And it's an RFI that my office put out on a requirement that I'm personally working, and I've got about 13 responses just on that one requirement. So imagine a contracting officer that's got 20 to 40, and Leonard mentioned to me, his folks tend to carry 50 at a time. Just imagine if they did even half, of their workload and did RFIs. They just don't have the bandwidth. Thanks.
Thank you, Katrina. And that's what you call a bonus, having our senior procurement executive jump in. The HCAs may want to follow up on that as well, but do we have another question? Yes.
So even when we submit them, is there a way for us to be able to get that information to, because sometimes the RFI, like you said, it does not contain either what's the most relevant for the industry or even contain what we think may be a better option, but oftentimes we don't get to explain or express some of the better, because you had said you don't know what you don't know, but if there's opportunities out there to make work streams better, we know that could help utilize stuff that we're already doing in industry. Oftentimes there's no leeway or no option to add that. And then, like you said, if we don't respond or we don't put the information and answer the questions the way you ask, then we're like deemed unresponsive. So where do
Yeah.
we give you the best information that we think may be beneficial?
So for most of me and my colleagues up here, and I'll let them jump in and add, but I know what we do is when we have our very specific questions that we want answered, we put those at the front. And then we also say, if there's any other information that you want to add or share that. The issue has been not that there's no way for people to add other information, is that they add the other information and don't answer the questions we need them to answer. So if you happen to see an RFI out at the street and it doesn't give that open-ended statement at the end that says, hey, please provide any additional information or capability statement or what have you with it, please just reach out to the specialist and say, is that going to be allowed for you to submit it? Most of the time, you'll find out that an amendment happens right after that to clarify that you can add additional information. You know, it is a human-based business, and sometimes we may forget to add a statement like that, but it's almost always acceptable because it's market research, and more information, the better.
So I just want to also add, if you don't hear anything, ask. I mean, like Katrina said, my specialists have a lot that's going on. And so they may just, in the busyness, just not have reached out or forgot. Absolutely. So I would just say, if you want that feedback, then just say, hey, I submitted this capability statement, haven't heard anything. Is there anything that we can hear back from you that will then give us more information on what's happening?
All right, thank you very much. So with the time being where it is, I am going to stop there before Mr. Jackson and his OSDBU team. I'm sorry. Oh, Mr. Jackson's OSDBU team get mad at me for throwing them off schedule for today. But I would like to mention, if you have additional questions, in HHS, the acquisition community and the OSDBU community work really closely together. I mean, it's really great to see. So please submit questions to them, and if they can't answer them themselves, they are in contact with the HCAs all the time, as well as within the Office of Acquisition. So please submit your questions to them, and we can get those responses back to you. And with that, I would like to invite the audience to join me in thanking our panel for this morning.